الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن نبينا محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
In yesterday's class, we spoke a bit about some of the things that are prohibited once a person enters the state of ihram. One misconception that I want to clarify to brothers and sisters is that sometimes people, they think that the ihram means the clothes themselves, meaning the two pieces of cloth that a person wears. Yes, this is called ihram, but in order for a person to enter the state of ihram, a person needs to say the intention. So this means, in other words, that whether you wear the garments themselves or not, that does not mean that you've entered the state of ihram. So a person could walk around here in Victoria wearing the clothes for Hajj and Umrah, but that does not mean that they've entered the state of ihram. In order for a person to enter the state of ihram, what does a person need to do? They need to make that intention, they need to say that intention. And where do you say this intention? You say the intention at the miqat, the station that we mentioned in previous classes. So we need to understand that part first. So once a person has said the intention and they put on these clothes, now from here on there are certain things that become prohibited for the person. And it is important for every person that is undertaking Hajj or Umrah that they stay away from these things as much as possible. And this is just to recap quickly some of the points that we mentioned yesterday. So the first point was that once a person has set the intention for Hajj or Umrah, it becomes haram, impermissible for that person to remove any hair, okay? Specifically on the head, and scholars say not only on the head but other parts of the body as well. So this means that a person should not shave any part of their body whilst being in the state of ihram. This is very important. Another point, and that first point goes both for men and women. Second point that we mentioned is cutting the nails. So once a person has entered the state of ihram, cutting your nails becomes haram. And this again is for both men and women, brothers and sisters. And the third point that the scholars mentioned is using perfume or using cologne, anything really that has a nice scent, fragrance to it. That becomes impermissible. And we said yesterday, this is to such an extent that a Muslim should avoid using scented soap. There's some soap, is scented, and the scholars in Islam, they've said it is prescribed for the Muslim to stay away from these kind of things in order to follow the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ to one's best ability. The fourth point was that whilst a person is in the state of ihram, it becomes impermissible to seek out marriage for yourself or to seek out marriage on the behalf of someone that you are responsible. As a man, you're perhaps wali for a woman, and then it becomes haram to engage in these kind of talks about marriage whilst you're in the state of ihram. Fifth point that the scholars mentioned is being intimate with one's spouse. Being intimate with one's spouse, touching or kissing in an intimate manner. This is prohibited whilst the person is in the state of ihram, and it actually becomes sinful. And the following point is connected to that, and the scholars, they specify that sexual intercourse, they've made that into a separate point because of how severe it is. And if a person was to commit this offense whilst being in the state of ihram, scholars in Islam, they've said this person's hajj is not acceptable, it is null and void, and the person is required to complete his hajj. He has to complete it. He can't say, well, I've done what I've done and then leave. No, he has to complete all the aspects of hajj until the very end, knowing that his hajj needs to be repeated. So he completes it, and then the following year, or as soon as possible, the person is required to repeat the hajj. Another point that the scholars have agreed on is the hunting game. This is something that they used to do back in the day, and this, whilst you're in the state of ihram, this becomes prohibited. Now, something else that I did not mention in yesterday's class before concluding is that all these points that we've mentioned so far, they are points that are shared between men and women. Okay, so this means that using perfume, cutting the hair, all these points that we mentioned, it is equal between men and women in terms of it being haram, not permissible. And then on top of these issues, there are two other issues that are specific for men, that men need to stay away from, and women do not need to stay away from this. So the first point that the scholars mentioned is that men need to avoid, while being in the state of ihram, covering the head. Okay? So this means that any form of hat or a shimar, some kind of headscarf, anything that you wear on top of your head whilst being in the state of ihram becomes impermissible. So this means that a Muslim needs to remove anything that they have on their head. Some people might ask, what about going into a taxi or being inside a building? Then you sort of technically have something above your head. The scholars in Islam say, no, this is acceptable. This is not what is referred to. What is referred to is a piece of clothing or something that a person wears on top of their head. This is an interesting point. Why is it interesting? Because this is one of the things that Sunnis differ from the Shia when it comes to Hajj. And they differ on a lot of things, but this is one of those visible things that they differ on. The Shia, they've taken this to such a literal extent, meaning that even when they travel during Hajj, they travel in open buses. Okay, sometimes if you had the opportunity or you've seen it on TV, you'll see when they travel on buses, their buses are different from other people's buses. Their buses don't have any roof. Okay, so and if you ask them why is this, why do you do this, then they tell you during Hajj you're not allowed to have anything above your head. But again, the understanding of the majority of the scholars of Islam is that this does not apply, because if you ride on the bus without a roof and then you step into a tent that is covering your head, it would be the same ruling. So just to make it simple, you don't wear anything on top of your head, and this is what the Prophet ﷺ intended. A person is allowed to have an umbrella. Okay, sometimes you see people walking around with an umbrella to shade themselves from the sun. This is acceptable. And women, obviously, they're allowed to cover their head. Not only allowed to, but they should follow the hijab that is prescribed for the women. Another point that is mentioned is the scholars in Islam, they've said when it comes to men specifically, they're not allowed to wear clothing that is outlined, it outlines the body parts. So things like trousers, t-shirts, or shirts in general, anything that has different segments, different parts to account for the limbs and the structure of the body, it becomes impermissible for a man to wear it. This might not be news to a lot of people. We know that a person is supposed to wear the clothing, the two pieces of cloth for Hajj, but what some people fail to realize is that this includes underwear. This includes underwear. So this means that when a man goes for Hajj or Umrah and they wear the two pieces of cloth, they are required to remove their undergarment and to wear that piece of cloth without any undergarment underneath. And this is the way that Muslims wear this piece of cloth. There's a bottom section and there's a top section. Now the bottom section in Arabic it is referred to as izar. Okay, so the bottom section is referred to as the izar, and the top section is referred to as rida or as rida. So the bottom one, you tie it firmly. Sometimes some people might want to wear a belt around. That is fine. There's nothing that prohibits wearing a belt with the the izar, and the rida, you wear it on top of your shoulders and you make sure that you cover your body. Some people, they just put it in a way where the chest area and the body is generally exposed. This is not something that is advised. It does not nullify a person's Hajj, but a person should try to make a conscious effort to always remain as covered as possible. So these are the things that we mentioned yesterday, some of the parts we mentioned already, and these other two parts specifically for the brothers, the men, are new things that we did not mention yesterday. As for today's class, inshallah, I want to keep it relatively short, but also I want to move on because there are certain things that we need to cover. So today we'll talk about the Hajj itself. Okay, people sometimes they think that Hajj, it all happens one day. Or some people, they think Hajj is a whole month or 2 months. But the reality of Hajj is that if you count the amount of days that a person actually does the rituals for Hajj, you will come to realize that these days are 5. There are 5 days of Hajj. So if, technically speaking, if a person wanted to just come for Hajj and then get out as soon as possible without having done anything that is impermissible, it would take them 5 days. It would take them 5 days as a minimum. And obviously we know that when people go, especially from Muslim countries, when you have that opportunity, when you save up for your whole life sometimes, and you get a chance to go to Mecca and Medina, you want to spend as much time as possible, right? So you'll see people coming from Muslim countries, they spend a month, 2 months, 3 months sometimes. But people Muslims living in the West, generally speaking, when they go for Hajj, they might be gone 2 weeks, okay? Because they have to come back, they have work, they have other things that they have to attend to. So 2 weeks, 5 days for the actual Hajj, and the other days accounts for the trip, and also people what they do once they've finished the Hajj or just before undertaking the Hajj, they go to Medina and they spend some time doing the ziyarah, visiting certain places in Medina that the Prophet ﷺ encouraged Muslims to visit. So these 5 days, what are these 5 days of Hajj? So the first day of Hajj, when Hajj officially starts, it is the 8th day of Dhul Hijjah. 8th of Dhul Hijjah is the day where Hajj starts. Okay? Anything before that is Umrah, and people performing Umrah and so on. And you will see, as soon as the 1st of Dhul Hijjah starts, if you look at TV channels that show Mecca and Medina, especially Mecca, you will see the amount of people increasing. Okay, so by the 8th or even sometimes 7th, you will see the amount of people in Mecca at Masjid al-Haram are a lot. Okay, most of the Hujjaj have arrived in Mecca by that time. So this first day, the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, it is known by another name. It is known by the name of Yom Tarwiyah. Yom Tarwiyah. And this is in reference to, it means basically the day of watering.